Thank you for inviting me to participate in this 33rd Martin Luther King observance. It's an honor to me to be here. The things that Levi said about me were not things that I did all on my own. We have 225 people that now work at the center, 40 lawyers, offices in other cities in Montgomery. So the thanks certainly goes to a lot of people, as well as the 300,000 people who support our work, and I know many of you are here today. I was thinking about growing up in Montgomery, Alabama, and with Levi over here, but he was a few years behind me, but not many. And we actually grew up in a little bit of different worlds. His daddy had a PhD, and he was president of the prestigious Alabama State University. And Ron went to a great school on that campus. And our family grew up on a small cotton farm. My father didn't graduate from high school. And we kind of had a hard time because we didn't own any land. We rented from other white people. And I guess the blessing I got was the fact that I had to work in the cotton fields alongside African Americans, and I began to feel what they felt. But we also had another thing in common, and that was that we both grew up in the Baptist church. He went to the prestigious, what is now the Martin Luther King Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, where King founded the Civil Rights Movement. And I went to a little small country church with about 100 people, members out in a rural cotton farming community in Montgomery County. But the teachers taught us some of the same things, because last night at dinner we got a bottle of wine, but he said, you know, Brother Dees, I didn't drink until I was in my late 30s, and I said, I didn't either. And maybe the reason was because he had a teacher who I guess was like my mentor in my little school, at segregated school, and also was a teacher in my Sunday school, Mrs. Farabelle Johnson. And she wanted us to grow up to be good citizens, to be good men and women. And there were two things that she felt that we should not do if we were going to grow up to be successful people. One was we should not smoke cigarettes, and the other one, we should not drink alcoholic beverages. I did great on the first one. In fact, if all America had had her for a teacher, there would be, Johns Hopkins would have many fewer patients because nobody in America would smoke. And the reason is because we had to say a little rhyme. We said it in Sunday school, we said it in class because she taught in both places. We had to say that tobacco is a filthy weed, and from the devil does proceed. It picks your pockets and burns your clothes and makes a smokestack of your nose. But on this drinking, she was much more serious. She had a button about yay big around, and I think she got this button because during the Prohibition constitutional battle, I'm sure she led the troops down in Montgomery County, Alabama. And she clearly did not want anybody to drink. She died an old maid. Because that button, it said, lips that touch wine shall not touch mine. And one day I'm sitting in class, I'm 12 years old, and I'm kind of like the lawyer to be, and I've been listening to her services and her sermons in our classroom because we had Bible verses on the board in class as well as Sunday school, because that's the way we did it back then. And she was going on and on with a temperance lesson. I said, but Miss Johnson, you told us last week that Jesus turned water into wine in one of his miracles. And she said, yes, Morris Dees, we'd have thought a whole lot more of Jesus if he hadn't have done that. Every morning, she took us out in front of that little school and with the other class, the other 60 or 70 students in that school. And we raised the flag, and we put our hands on our hearts, and we said the Pledge of Allegiance. And I remember one line that stuck with me from that pledge, a line that she repeated to us back in class. One nation with liberty, justice for all. It was not much that this dear little lady could do to change things in the South, but she did point out what she thought was a bad way that colored people, was the word used then, weren't being treated fairly. I wasn't able to do much about it either at that time, but one of my neighbors, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, stepped forward along with Rosa Parks and did. A man who had to face many of his contemporaries, a lot of the African-American ministers, in fact, in Montgomery, who wanted to leave things alone. He had to face many of his contemporaries who had little vision. He had to face politicians, not just in the South, but in Washington, D.C., down the road here, who had little backbone. And finally, he faced a terrorist with no conscience. In one of his speeches in Washington, he made a statement that I think that we should think about today. He said that there are lonely islands of poverty and injustice in this great, vast ocean of America. Well, today, over 40 years later, there are those in this nation who are not finding opportunity or justice. And if Dr. King was here today, he might tell you that the march for justice continues. It didn't end with the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It continues today. And speakers before me have pointed out some of the issues that we have to confront today and deal with. You know these issues: economic differences, economic people on this side with enormous wealth, and so many more that don't have wealth and their income has not changed in the last 30 or 40 years. Mass incarceration is a major issue that we have to deal with this country today. And also we have a problem of trying to determine how we stop racial profiling by law enforcement in this country. It's not an easy problem. We saw what happened. 12-year-old child gets shot with a toy gun, somebody gets choked, and probably was no threat to anybody in New York. Those go on and on. It's a major problem in this country. Healthcare is another problem. We have a healthcare bill that is having its problems today, but we have, the new institutions should know more about this and be more concerned than anybody in this country. But it has not been resolved, and it hasn't been solved. The LGBT issue is one that the Southern Poverty Law Center is spending an enormous amount of time on. It's kind of one of the new civil rights movements. It's an issue that I think Dr. King would lead the parade for. And we just have so many more issues that affecting this country, and probably the one that is one of the ones we have the most problem with is immigration. How do we deal with people in this country who are different? And hence, that's where I think the problem is for this nation, and what I want to talk to you today about this whole issue of tolerance and diversity, its joys and greatnesses, and its problems and opportunities. In 1948, when I was sitting in that little classroom in that little segregated country school, only 15% of the people in this nation were people of color. Today, it's 37%. Many states like California and other states, it's over a majority, and by the year 2040, people like myself and many of you in this room are going to be in a minority. And that is really causing fear and concern with a lot of people in this nation, people who control the power, the money, and the economics in this country. That's really what the healthcare fight is all about. There are people over here saying, well, there are individuals they got the power and the money and the vote and the gridlock in Congress. They're saying people over here are getting things that we don't think they should get because they belong to us. kind of a privileged type argument. We've seen a lot of problems from this fear caused by a changing America. There are over 1,000 hate groups, not the kind we put out of business, the big Klan groups, the Aryan Nations and others, but small hate groups. 650 hate websites promoting the worst kind of hate that you could imagine. But a lot of the hate that I fought in the last 25 years in court, when I stood in front of juries and read some of the material when I was suing the Klan for burning a church in South Carolina, and I was reading the material they fed their members, you can see that on mainstream television today in America, unfortunately. We see so much division in this nation, and I think it's caused from this country, this issue of fear. When I grew up on that small cotton farm in Montgomery County, Alabama, I didn't know what diversity was all about. We had the African Americans who worked the fields and white people on the land, and I didn't think about diversity until I had an opportunity to represent a group of immigrants in this country that changed my mind forever and made me understand that this nation is great because of our diversity and not in spite of it. After the Vietnam War, about 500,000 Vietnamese were brought to this country. Those that fought on the other side, had they stayed behind, they probably would have been jailed or killed or in some way not treated fairly. But many organizations, Catholic Relief Service and others, brought these people to the United States and settled them all over America. And about 50,000 were settled down in the Galveston Bay, Texas area. They came with the clothes on their back. But like so many immigrants before them, they began to work hard. They immediately began to take over all type businesses, flower shops, a lot of garage repair places, fruit stands, restaurants. And a small group of about 50 decided that they wanted to go into the fishing, shrimping business, like they'd done around the warm waters of Saigon Harbor and other places. And they didn't have any money to buy these $200,000 and $300,000 trawlers that the 500 or 600 American fishermen own, that many boats in the Galveston Bay area, shrimping and fishing. So they pooled their monies together and they bought old broken down boats, $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000, raised them and fixed them up and got the engines working, and they went out to fish. They got up early and stayed late, and it wasn't long before, and there's no better way to put it, the American fishermen became jealous. And they went to the Texas legislature and said, pass a law that would not allow these immigrants to have fishing licenses because these are our fish. This is American waters. Texas legislature in its wisdom said, we can't do that. These are our friends and we're a free enterprise country. Well, that didn't sit well with the group of the American fishermen and their organization, and they turned to the world's oldest continued hate group. In this case, the Texas Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And they began a program to terrorize these 50 or so Vietnamese fishermen with their little boats so they wouldn't go out to shrimp in March when the shrimping season opened. They burned a couple of their boats. It's hard to find out who did it. FBI and others tried, but clearly these people weren't burning their own boats. Then they burned a 50-foot cross down in Kemah, Texas, where the Clear Creek Channel goes out into the bay where the boats go out to fish. Well, Vietnamese fishermen got the idea quick, and they put their boats up for sale. They were frightened. They remember the Khmer Rouge. They thought that's what the Klan was today in America. And so a lawyer down there who did real estate work called us up and said, could you come down here and see if you can help us? And I remember arriving at the dock in Kemah, Texas, where the Vietnamese boats were tied up, and little boats, you've probably seen them around this area, old boats with little glass wheelhouses, and they were kind of rocking in the water, and each wheelhouse was a for sale sign, the kind of sign you'd buy at a hardware store. And I was talking to Nguyen Van Nam, the leader of the Vietnamese fishing group, and I said, Nam, you know, I'm not sure we can help you, but we'll try. We'll go to federal court and we'll seek an injunction against the Klan and the named American fishermen that we've been identified. And For you non-lawyers, it means if you get an injunction, it's telling somebody not to do something, and if they do it, then they go to federal prison for criminal contempt of court. We got the fishermen together, and they reluctantly agreed, and we began to go to work. And we found a number of American fishermen who didn't like what they had seen. They had become to know these people. They had been in their homes. They knew they were hardworking, had good families, good family values. And so they agreed to testify for us. Several did, that they'd been threatened by the Klan and other American fishermen. If they allowed these Vietnamese to tie their boats up at their docks, they'd burn their docks and their houses down. Just the testimony we needed to win a federal suit. Getting ready to go to court on Monday morning, and I got a call from Mr. Van Dam on Sunday afternoon. He said, "Mr. Dees, drop the lawsuit." I said, "No, Nam, we can't drop this lawsuit. We're going to win." He said, "No, we've been told by the leaders of the other Vietnamese businesses to drop the lawsuit because they're worried about them coming after their businesses." I said, "Nam, you know, if I don't have a case, if I don't have a client, I have to tell the judge it's over. But would you give me an opportunity tonight to talk to your leaders in the Vietnamese community and their fishermen and their families?" Well, about 7 that evening, I was in a small Catholic church with a priest standing to interpret. These people were sitting there. Many had come with the clothes they came to war this country in, very patient, respectful. And I said, "You know, folks, don't drop your lawsuit. America's a nation of laws. Laws designed to protect the minority from the majority if the majority is breaking the law. I know you're afraid, but, you know, let me tell you about another man at another time whose people's rights were violated. Their churches were burned. Their people were harmed. The man was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And he persisted. And the leaders of his movement persisted because their people's rights were violated. And had they not persisted and used our courts time and time again, they wouldn't have won the rights they had as soon as they did. I left. It must have been a pretty heated discussion. These people were afraid. But later that night, I got a call from Nguyen Van Dam, and he said, "Continue the case." We had a very wonderful federal judge there, and we put on good evidence, and at the end of the trial for the week, she issued a very strong injunction naming a large number of Klan leaders and American fishermen not to interfere with the Vietnamese. And I got an opportunity to go down to the blessing of the fleet on Monday morning, a ceremony that Vietnamese have as their families go out to the dangers of the open waters. And I arrived down at Kemo, Texas on the dock where the Clear Creek Channel comes out into the Gulf, Mexico. And there were about 7,500 family members sitting on the dock there. And there's a Catholic priest there to bless the boats. The sun hadn't come up, the fog was hanging heavy over the bay. Didn't see any boats or hear any until about 30 minutes later, a boat popped out through the fog and came by the reviewing stand, and the priest blessed that boat and another, until about 15 or 20 boats had gone on out into the open waters. The sun began to burn through the fog, and as I looked to my right and my left, I could see the sun glistening off the badges of the United States Marshals that had been sent there to protect these immigrants. And as I looked into the faces of the family members sitting there that morning, I have to tell you, I felt proud to be their lawyer. And I also felt proud to be an American, seeing the majesty of our justice system at work. And as I watched these wonderful, proud immigrants finding a place at America's table, but not just finding a place at America's table like immigrants and people who've come before us, but building that table, so to speak, for the greatness of this nation. You know, I'm not sure what the solution that we have today to deal with the issues that divide us in so many ways, by race, by ethnicity, by sexual orientation, reputation, by income,